Welcome to Rare But Real, where we discuss what it takes to be a woman of God in these challenging days. And now, please welcome your host, Audrey Brogy.
Hey there. Well, here it's time again for Real Questions, the question of the week. And this question comes up every year. And the question is, what about Halloween? And because this podcast will drop on Friday, which is October 31st, I thought it would be a good time to go ahead and answer this year. And as I do that, I'm going to start with giving you a link to a site that will be very helpful for you. A lot of you probably are already aware of the site called gotquestions.org, gotquestions.org. And as I get started, I'm just going to read this article because I think it's wonderful, and then I'll share a little bit of kind of our journey over the years with this quote-unquote holiday, if that's what you want to call it. But here's the question on Got Questions. They said, should Christians celebrate Halloween? And I'm going to read the answer. It's not real long, so just you can listen, and you can also go to the site and read it again yourself. But here it is. Due to its decidedly pagan origins, the answer to the question as to whether Christians should celebrate Halloween is a resounding no. And of course, they put in italics, celebrate. The answer to the question as to whether can Christians participate in Halloween activities without compromising their faith is more difficult. Some Christians participate in Halloween simply by dressing up in a costume and having fun, seeing it as innocent and harmless. Other Christians are equally convinced that any form of participation is sinful due to the fact that Halloween is a satanic holiday established to worship evil spirits and promote darkness and wickedness. So who is right? Is it possible for Christians to participate in Halloween without compromising their faith? Halloween, no matter how commercialized, has almost completely pagan origins. As innocent as it may seem to some, it is not something to be taken lightly. Christians tend to have various ways to observe or avoid Halloween. For some, it means having an alternative harvest party. For others, it's staying away from the ghosts, witches, goblins, etc., and wearing innocuous costumes like little princesses, clowns, cowboys, superheroes. Some choose not to do anything, electing to lock themselves in the house with the lights off. Scripture does not speak at all about Halloween, but it does give us some principles on which we can make a decision. In Old Testament Israel, witchcraft was a crime punishable by death. Scriptural references for that are Exodus 22, verse 18, Leviticus 19, verse 31, Leviticus 20, verse 6, and verse 27. The New Testament teaching about the occult is clear. Acts 8, verses 9 to 24, the story of Simon, shows that occultism and Christianity do not mix. The account of Elymas, the sorcerer, in Acts 13, verses 6 to 11, reveals that sorcery is violently opposed to Christianity. Paul called Elymas a child of the devil, an enemy of righteousness, and a perverter of the ways of God. In Acts 16, at Philippi, a fortune-telling girl lost her demon powers when the evil spirit was cast out by Paul. The interesting matter here is that Paul refused to allow even good statements to come from a demon-influenced person. Acts 19 shows new converts who have abruptly broken with their former occultism by confessing, showing their evil deeds, bringing their magic paraphernalia, and burning it before everyone. And that's in Acts 19, verse 19. So, should a Christian participate in Halloween? Is there anything evil about a Christian dressing up in an innocent costume and going around the block asking for candy? No, there is not. Are there things about Halloween that are anti-Christian and should be completely avoided? Absolutely. If parents are going to allow their children to participate in Halloween, they should make sure to keep them from getting involved in the darker aspects of the day. If Christians are going to take part in Halloween, their attitude, dress, and most importantly, their behavior should still reflect reflect a redeemed life according to Philippians 1 verse 27. There are many churches that hold harvest festivals and incorporate costumes, but in a godly environment. There are many Christians who hand out tracts that share the gospel along with the Halloween candy. The decision is ultimately ours to make in the spirit of Christian freedom. But as with all things, we are to incorporate the principles of Romans 14. We cannot allow our own convictions about a holiday to cause division in the body of Christ, nor can we use our freedom to cause others to stumble in their faith. We are to do all things to the glory of God, according to 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. Now, there are other articles on the site. I just read you this particular one, but that will give you, I love this site because not only does it answer the question and give you scriptural references for those things, but then they have, for further study, and they give you some more articles to read and related articles. And even in this one, if you go to Got Questions and type in Halloween, these things will come up because it will talk about the origins of Halloween. What is All Saints Day? What does the Bible say about ghosts and hauntings? Is there activity of demonic spirits in the world today? What is All Souls Day? All kinds of things that will be very helpful. And if this had been around when I was a young parent, I would have totally been going and finding so much information because it's so very helpful. Now, having read the article, I have to say that I love this article. I think it's very clear and very good. And there's also a video, which I didn't click on yet, but I probably will watch that later. And you might want to watch that as well. But having said that, I'll just tell you a little bit about our history with this quote unquote holiday. You know, when I was growing up as a child, I remember trick-or-treating a few times. I don't remember it as a big deal. I don't remember it being the big deal that it is today with the decorations and all that kind of stuff. I saw some of that when I was growing up, but it was just not something that my family emphasized, and probably because I grew up in a Christian home and it wasn't a big thing. However, I do remember going to some fall type parties, and my older siblings might remember more about it because even, when they're a little bit older, they remember sometimes more of the details about it. But I remember it was at the VFW, and there was always like this fall party that we went to, and you got plenty of candy. And I don't remember anything, wicked being attached to it. I don't remember being scared by weird costumes. All the stuff you see today, it just wasn't a part of my childhood that I recall. And I know all of us have different memories of our childhood growing up, and so many times, we remember in watercolors, and sometimes, we have like things that we remember and other things we don't. Our siblings can say, well, don't you remember that? And I'm like, no, I don't. Or I'll say, don't you remember that? And they'll say, no, we don't. Or we remember things differently. But I do remember getting the candy, and that was the most exciting thing. And I do remember sometimes dressing up, but it was always in fun type costumes, like a hobo or, I don't know, just and as this article said, like a Disney princess or something like that. Or for me, it would be more like a Cinderella, those kinds of things. So I remember that. And then, I don't remember it being a big deal by the time I got to high school. I don't remember that. I do remember when I was in college at UNC, I remember Halloween I would see all kinds of, people, other students dressing up and walking around campus being kind of crazy on that. On Halloween. I remember that, but I still don't remember evil being attached to it, even though maybe I knew a little bit, that there was goblins and all that kind of stuff. But once I got married and we started having our children, then I started thinking about it more, because is there something happens to you when you have children, you get so protective. You look at this baby and you just want to protect them with your life. You want to do everything you can to keep evil away from them, to point them towards good, and to do everything in your power, if you're a believer, to raise them to love Christ and not to be a stumbling block in their lives. And so I remember at that time, now there wasn't the internet like it is now. There was no smartphones. There was no thing where you could Google it and find out information. Everything that you found found out was by going to the library or reading in the newspaper, or Christians sharing their information and from your, pastors and things like that. But I do remember reading a little bit more about the origins and the pagan beginnings of Halloween. And I don't remember Carl and I making we're never going to do this, or we are going to do that. I don't remember that. But I do remember that we didn't make it a big deal. And our church, when our children were growing up, did what this article even said. We had, harvest festivals, and we had alternatives, like a fun party for kids, so that they didn't do all these things. And two, thinking about it, back in the 80s, that was the time of, there was a lot of, fear mongering about children being kidnapped and all those kinds of things, and things showing up in their candy. So we were very protective in that sense as well. But we did offer alternatives so that our kids could have candy. And then I remember there was this really sweet older lady in our neighborhood who, a few times we let them go. We went with her, and we went to houses that we knew. And I remember, because my boys had these, masks, and it was from Sesame Street masks that they wore, and Cookie Monster. And anyway, and we did that, and so that they could get the fun aspects of getting candy. And so we did that. And then as my children got older and we moved to Beaufort, we started having our church harvest parties on Halloween. And so our kids got plenty of candy, and they got to do all the fun hay rides and all the stuff that's associated with fall. And then there were a few times when we were at home on Halloween, and those times I would have candy, and I would order from Child Evangelism Fellowship some gospel tracts, and I would give those out. I would let the children do that. And because we figure, they're going to come to our door, we may as well share the gospel with them. So there was that, and that's kind of what we did. And then by the time that my children grew up and started having their children, I remember distinctly when Jack was a little boy and Jordan and Maureen were in Massachusetts, and us going to, when he was at Harvard, and we went to this neighborhood, and it was just very fun. It was very community centered. It was very sweet. It was not scary. It was not, scaring the children to death. It was like people sitting out on their front steps and offer, and having candy. And it was almost like, it was just a really great experience. It was just really fun. And so I can see that side of it, even as this article talked about the innocence of dressing up and turning it into something wholesome. And so I agree with the author of this article about keeping your children away from the evil aspects. But I would also add too, as your children are growing up, teach them the origins of it. Teach them why you do what you do. I don't know if we were as good about that as we should have been when our children were growing up. I'm sure Carl could answer that question even better. But I do remember directing them to the innocent part and the fun part, and talking about the Reformation, and talking about All Saints Day, and steering them in that direction. But neither did we want to keep them from having the fun of getting candy and dressing up in a fun costume and doing those innocent things. So, as this article ended and said, if Christians are going to take part, their attitude, dress, and most importantly, their behavior should still reflect a redeemed life, according to Philippians 1:27. And then it go, as you heard me read it earlier, there's so many things with the festivals that you can do, fall festivals that incorporate costumes, but in a godly way. So that's kind of where we land on it. I definitely believe that it's wrong to let your children partake on the evil side of it. I do remember too, even with my grandchildren, with Jack and Luke and Claire, they were here one time, and then another time with grandchildren, and we did take them to fun neighborhoods that did the same kind of thing that I experienced up in Massachusetts. And I remember one particular year I had Claire and Grace and Audrey Kate, and they dressed up like little princesses, and we went to Habersham, and then because we had friends there who welcomed us and had us over. And then earlier than that, when I had Jack Luke and Claire. Jack and Luke were little boys, but I dressed them up as Moses and Aaron, and Claire as Paula Dean rather than Miriam, but maybe I should have done Miriam. But it was just really fun, and it was just a fun aspect, and there was no evil associated with it whatsoever. It was very innocent. So that's where I land on it. I hope it helps. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to send them my way. And we'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this episode of Rare But Real, be sure to subscribe so that you will be notified when a new episode is posted. Please consider taking a moment to leave a review, as it helps others discover the podcast. Follow Audrey on Instagram and Facebook at Rare But Real, and listen to all of her messages on the Search the Scriptures app.